So, should I tell you the story about
We haven't. Have you?
No, we're started.
your starting?
Yeah, so we can start whenever.
Okay, I got a prop here. This is a piece of tin I found about 2 years ago after a heavy rain in the bottom of the gully over here. And it's a remnants. It reminded me when we were kids, we did a scrap metal drive for World War II. And we had to, scavenge as much metal as we could for the drive. And there were pieces of an old junk Model T in a gully. It wasn't a whole car, but there were fenders and pieces. So we scrounged that out, and this piece was missed. And this, I looked it up on the web. It's a oil pan for a 1912 to 1924 Model T engine. And we got a lot of other parts of the car, but not this one. So, and that's about what I can say about that little short.
Tell them about your Model T.
My Model T?
Yeah.
My Model T was 25 Model T. And the neighbor had it, and we drove it around the neighborhood a little bit. But it wasn't really much of a car, just four wheels and a steering wheel sort of thing. And it actually ran. It had an electric starter, and it also had a crank, so you could hand crank it if you wanted to. The wheels were wire spoke rather than wood spoke wheels. And it had a gas tank, no body on it, but it's a gas tank in the back, and a electric fuel pump. And the engine was hopped up with an overhead valve engine, a Rajo racing head on it, and the rear end was a two-speed rear end, which we could shift for low range or high range. And the transmission on a Model T was a planetary transmission that gave you two speeds, and you operated it with foot pedals. And there are three pedals on the transmission. There's a brake and a reverse and a forward, low or high. And and the throttle is on the steering wheel. On the right-hand lever on the steering wheel was your throttle, and the left-hand lever on the steering wheel was the spark advance. So this Model T, you could get it fired up, and if you had the spark retarded, it would backfire, and it would go off like a cannon. It was really a noisy machine, but backfiring, it would also backfire through the air intake, which was near the electric fuel pump feeding the engine, and it would often catch fire. We grabbed handfuls of dirt to put the fire out, so never got seriously burned, but it was a hazard that way. But I actually drove it down to the center of Topanga one time. It was really not a road-worthy machine, but it drove down there and drove back. Pretty amazing. And what was I going to say? I forgot where I was going. Anyway, it was. Oh, one winter it was sitting out, didn't have any cover over it, and water got into some cylinders and froze up the engine. engine would not turn over. It was frozen, rusted. And so I ended up pulling the head off, which was kind of a project, and taking 2x4s and a big sledgehammer and pounding the cylinder loose so they would go up and down and get freed up again so the engine would turn over. And it did. It wasn't, but I wasn't really, it was a car, but it was just more of a thing to play with, so we'll say.
I have a question.
What was that?
I have a question about
Yeah.
that. How common, well, what year was this? I know you said the car was a 25, but what year do you think that this was, and how common were cars in the canyon? And I guess as you...
Well, the year this happened would be around about 1950.
Okay.
And Model Ts were fairly scarce at that point. So I went to high school 1948 to 52, and the common cars for the poorer kids were Model A's that their dads had given them, or older cars like that, like the early 30s.
Yeah.
And but Model Ts, they quit producing them in 1927, I think. So, and but this particular Model T, the neighbor who gave it to me, he knew about some Model T bodies that were in the gully up on West Hillside at Melcher's, George Melcher's place. And so we went up there and fished a junk Model T out of the gully and bolted it onto this 25 chassis and built a seat that would have you someplace to sit on rather than metal springs.
Wow.
It was like I say, it was kind of a contraption.
And in 1950, how mobile were people in Topanga, and were people spending the majority of their time here, or were people commuting out of the canyon to work?
Well, during World War II, I think a lot of for the population came into the canyon on the airplane factories and the war effort, and they were looking for places to live, and so they were commuting out of the canyon to their jobs. My dad had just one car, which he drove to work, so my mother never did drive until 1950, say. At about that time, I got the old family car and I drove it to high school. And the old family car was a tired 1935 Ford flathead, and it would be a real interesting car to have today if you kept it, restored it. But being in high school, you tried to you'd speed shift to show off, and I managed to knock a couple gears out of the transmission, which was already pretty worn. So in high school, I had to pull the transmission out, and the car was an old car with floorboards, which were actual boards, and so the transmission came up in the front seat and out the door. You didn't.
David Anderson.
There, I got a call here. So, anyway, I learned how to build a transmission when I was in high school, and did various other improvements on the car to keep it running for a few years. Oh, the Model T, I was going to tell you, I took it down the hill, and a Model T has only, from the factory, has only rear wheel brakes, no brakes in the front. Well, my Model T only had brakes in one wheel. And so you had that brake, and there's another brake on the transmission shaft, which you operate with a foot pedal. But the two-speed rear end was pretty well worn, and it had a neutral that could drop into, which disconnected the drive shaft from the rear wheels. And so there was one day I was driving around the neighborhood, and it dropped into neutral on me. No brakes, almost no brakes, and I bounced off a telephone pole fence post, and the big springy bumper just bounced. If you did it with today's car, it would be $3,000 or $4,000 worth of damage, you know. But
So, Larry, was this your dad, Harvey's car too, for his work as fire chief?
what was the question?
Your dad was Harvey Anderson, was fire chief
Yeah.
in Topanga.
Yeah, captain at Topanga.
Captain, could you tell me a little bit more about him? And you mentioned he put a fire radio in his car.
Well, he was captain. It ended up he didn't have to stay overnight at the station, but he was on call, and so the fire department put a fire radio in his old Ford, the one that I inherited to drive to high school, and he always had that fire radio that connected to the fire department.
Okay, and could you tell us, Larry, introduce yourself a little bit and how you ended up in Topanga?
Oh my. Well, where do you start? Like I said, my parents moved here when I was 3 years old, and my dad got the job of being captain at Topanga, and that was an improvement over his job, which was pretty wintry up at Sandberg, where they previously were stationed. But so I grew up in Topanga. Went to Topanga Grammar School. There was no such thing as kindergarten in those days. So I went to first grade through 8, and then I went to high school. We didn't have middle school or junior high. It was just straight to high school, and 4 years of high school at Canoga Park. And then after that, I went on to UCLA and became an engineer. So lived here most of my life, except for a couple years in the Navy, and about 5 years when I first got married. We lived in Redondo Beach and Torrance, and then I had the opportunity to work in Van Nuys for a building department for a while. So I decided to move back and let the kids grow up in Topanga, where they'd have more freedom to run and
Well, you don't have all the noises and not worried about traffic.
and yeah, we just weren't used to life in the city, I guess you could say. It was too different.
So you're Larry Anderson, and your dad was Harvey, and your mom Alice. And growing up here, you said that you knew Mort Allen. Could you tell us a little bit more about Mort Allen and the early homesteaders here?
Well, Mort Allen is an early Topanga pioneer. He came to the canyon, and I think it was around 1892 or something, like fairly early. And he bought a quarter section of land. And like many of the Topanga people, they logged oak trees and hauled the oak wood into Los Angeles for firewood, because in those days they didn't have any other energy to fuel the wood stoves. And Mort eventually took his quarter section and subdivided it into checkerboard lots of 1 acre each, and he called it the Garrapatas tract. Apparently, he didn't have a numbering system for track maps in those days, and it was called the Garrapatas tract. And the map just showed these 1 acre squares, 209 feet on a side, without any streets. And as he sold a lot, he would grant an easement across other lots for the owner to access their property. And he already had Robinson's Road going through this area to the Robinson Ranch up where Trippett State Park is now. And so I used that as access, and forgot where I was going on that one. Anyway, he sold lots. There was a big development boom in Topanga in say about 1920s, early 20s, probably, and the various real estate people were selling lots here and there, but there wasn't any water, and so water was always a problem. And when my dad bought, he bought the place down the hill in 1937, and they had an old well that they had a share in with 3 other owners, I believe. They had to share time pumping to fill their individual water tanks. And my dad's property had a big scaffold in the back with a water tank on top of a 20-foot scaffold. And the story is my little brother climbed that one time. He was about 2 years old and scared everybody, but he got down safe. But anyway, they eventually drilled their own water well to get more water, and he went 300 feet deep to find a decent water supply, and it still wasn't plush with water, but if you left the hose on overnight, you could drain the tank, and then you'd be out of water until you could pump the tank back up again. And
How did you get to meet
Mort Allen lived nearby, actually, at the end of Fontaine Road, and he would hike over here a few times, and I remember him as a small kid. He always seemed like a Southern gentleman sort of a guy with a big rum hat, and I think he had a mustache and almost like a Colonel Sanders character, but he would greet my mother with big sweeping bow.
Sorry, Larry, I'll ask you to repeat that once more.
What was that?
I'm going to ask you to repeat that because there's like a
Crosstalk.
Yeah.
He would hike over here occasionally and greet my mother with a big sweeping bow, like a Southern gentleman sort of thing. I don't know. I've forgotten where he's from. Maybe he was from the South. I don't know. But
I think the Topanga story said he was from Missouri.
Missouri.
I
Okay.
think so. And he came over when he was about 7.
Oh.
And I think you mentioned to me a story about him trying to make charcoal because he was selling oak wood in the city, and I think you said he thought charcoal would be profitable, and you showed me a place where he was trying to make charcoal on your property here.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Should I go get I got a couple of props over here. Should I go get them?
No, that's okay. Just tell the story for now. Yeah.
You want to hear the story?
That'll be the next interview, maybe.
Okay. So the story is that Mort decided it'd be more profitable to convert the oak firewood into charcoal. So he hired a crew of Mexicans, and they worked for who knows how long and created a gigantic pile of oak. And to make charcoal, you have to burn the oak with very little oxygen, so it's partially burnt. And so they covered it with clay. I don't know whether it was wet clay or not, but preferably probably wet clay, and set it afire so that it would smolder and burn very slowly. But the huge pile of oak wood caught fire and burnt so fiercely that it turned a section of earth down the hill here into brick. And you can still find evidence of brick on the hillside down there. And so I know it to be a true story because the evidence is there on the ground.
Yes, I've seen the evidence too.
Yeah.
It's a great story. So you said that everyone was burning oak wood, and when did you get electricity? What was daily life here? Your mom talks a little bit about it, your mom Alice, in her diary. Could you tell us a little bit about what day-to-day life living was like?
Well, we had electricity. We weren't that primitive. That electricity came in, if you look at the Topanga story, I think came in the 20s, early 20s. And Laurel lives in the house that was built, I think, around 1920, but maybe earlier. And it had been wired for electricity.
And Laurel is your granddaughter who lives here on the property with you.
Yeah.
And she's in the house the Topanga story mentioned Teddy Roosevelt may have used for his hunting lodge.
They may have. We don't really know. A picture of a artifact of the house is in the Topanga story. With the outhouse on the hill is a picture of the property long before Laurel moved there. But so the house was built without indoor plumbing. It had electricity, but no indoor plumbing. Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit more about all the generations here? Today you have your son and your granddaughter and your wife, and then also
we had our family, my mother and father and 4 boys grew up here. In 1942, my grandparents had heart attacks, and they decided to retire and move next door in my dad's house. And so I grew up with my grandparents living next door for quite a while. And then we moved back here, so that was 3 generations, and then our kids were 4th generation, and now Laurel is a granddaughter. She's a 5th generation, really, on the property. So, and like she mentioned to you earlier, was there's a cousin who's even another generation coming along. So there are a lot of Topanga people on the hill, nephew and brothers of Laurel and so forth.
you mentioned your grandfather lived here. He was an interesting character, and could you tell me a little bit more about him and his store in Santa Monica and your memories of him?
Well, my grandfather came out with his folks apparently they used to live near the Dodger Stadium downtown, and his father, my great-grandfather, was a railroad engineer, and then they moved to Santa Monica, and so my grandfather got interested in birds, and he would go on bird expeditions, scouting, mostly by bicycle. He would ride up the coast on low tide on hard sand and stay overnight maybe if the tides weren't right, and come back on the hard sand the next day. And he had access apparently to the Ringe property, which was pretty much shut off to the public because the Ringe riders would chase everybody out. They patrolled the property, and but he would also tell me about riding through Topanga, and I actually put together a talk for my bike club with pictures. I didn't have anything on Topanga at the time, but he would have come to Topanga, say in 1896, by going east, not over Sepulveda Pass, but because it was not built yet. So he went all the way on dirt, we'll say Wilshire Boulevard, to Cahuenga Pass, and out through the valley, and then maybe into Topanga by the Santa Maria's Road over Chalk Hill, and down to the center of Topanga. But from the center of Topanga out to the beach, there were no roads, not even a trail, because the bottom of the canyon is too rough. And so he would pick a bush or a tree and throw his bike down into the bush and climb down the rocks and retrieve the bike and pick another tree or bush to throw the bike into so it wouldn't get damaged badly, and proceed down the canyon until he got more level, and work their way out to the beach. And then they had the tide to deal with. So if the tide wasn't right, maybe they had to stay an extra half a day or something to wait for the hard sand. But so he also there was when he died, I inherited his roll-top desk, and just a great old traditional roll-top desk, and my oldest boy, Dave, and I decided to refinish it finally. And in one of the drawers was a roll of negatives that were very tightly wound and seemed to be fragile, and we were worried about straightening them out and breaking them all up. And eventually Dave figured out a way to compress them between pieces of plastic with a vacuum machine, and he was able to take prints off of them, and also digital. And so I've got all those pictures of early Santa Monica, pre-1900. There's a street I would call Second Boulevard, Second Street, maybe. Not a car in sight, just buggies and bicycles. But so.
Yeah, you showed me some of those pictures, and thank you for contributing some of them to the Historical Society archives. We're really happy to have those and look forward to seeing more of them. There are some photos of his bike shop, and he also, as you said, sold guns and got to know some of the hunters, and at the same time he was very active with the Ornithological Society and trying to preserve the condors in particular. Could you tell us a little bit more about his work with birds?
Well, he was, like you say, he was very active in that, and he became the secretary-treasurer for the Cooper Ornithological, I can't pronounce very good, Cooper Ornithological Club, and he was secretary-treasurer of that for years. Even after he retired, he had all these books and pamphlets and correspondence. He would work with his friends and handle the finances even. So, but
And just to put your story in context, we have a little background noise here, but to put your story in context of how your family came to California, your grandfather Lee, who owned the bike and gun shop, his parents came to California, and they have a really interesting story. Could you tell us a little bit about them?
My grandfather's parents
You gotta speak loud, Dad.
got the wood chipper going.
Yeah.
His parents, his father came west from the Civil War when he got out of the Civil War to hunt for gold, and first in Idaho, and I guess he's somewhere in his travels he ended up in California, and he liked California, but he eventually became a railroad engineer, and they settled in downtown Los Angeles first, and then moved to Santa Monica, and then my father, his parents came. His family was from City Island, New York, and I think that his grandfather came out to build minesweepers at San Pedro, and my grandfather on that side was a carpenter, but he knew how to build boats as well, and so both of my parents were native Los Angeles people, and of course I grew up in Los Angeles too.
And Lee, his full name, your grandfather Lee, his full name was Willie Lee, and he was named after General Lee. And
Apparently, yeah.
And your mom, could you, your mom's grandmother, your great grandmother, she, could you tell me, she had kind of an interesting partnership with your great grandfather because he was a union drummer, as you mentioned. And
yeah, well, my great grandfather was a union drummer on the union side, and my great grandmother was a Southerner, and she my mother recalls her telling a story about sitting on a fence and spitting at the Union soldiers when they marched by, because her family had been hurt pretty good by the war, but they ended up marrying, and they stayed married for, I don't know, long time. So
then coming back to you, we talked a little bit about some of your other adventures here with scouting and going to school, Topanga Elementary, which is the current site of Froggy's Restaurant.
yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of those experiences?
Well, when we started, I started grammar school in 1940, and at that time there were 4 teachers for 8 grades of students. So each teacher had 2 grades in the room. Plus the first and second grade teacher was also the school principal, Mrs. Segrist. And then as I went through, there was quite a bit of growth in those days, and the school expanded quite a bit by the time I graduated from 8th grade. So, but the school was right where Froggy's is now, and so you had a divider in that one big room. They would divide first and second grade from the 3rd and 4th grade, and dividers could be opened, and they would have an assembly. Oh my goodness. We got side entertainment here. They could open the dividers to have an assembly for the whole school, but the other classrooms were in temporary bungalows down on the playground level, which was next to the creek. And the playground had strictly dirt, no lawn, no rubber mats, no rocks it had. So, and then there was a kind of a really treacherous merry-go-round plaything that amazingly nobody got killed on, but it could spin very fast if the big guys were spinning it. The attempt was to spin it fast enough so centrifugally the little kids would fly off. But it was fairly close to the creek, which was fenced off with a chain link fence near the creek. But the chain link fence, a lot of wear and tear over the years. You could slide off the merry-go-round and catch your leg underneath the sharp points of the chain link, and it was like a bear trap, hard to get out of. But then we had the there was a volunteer or optional woodworking class that the bus driver taught during part of the day. You could go in, maybe it was during recess, I've forgotten. But it was pretty amazing that you could teach woodworking to grammar school kids. So.
And what did extracurricular activity look like? So after school?
At grammar school, not much. It was walking distance being at Froggy's, and we would walk home.
Right.
And we would pass the outside inn. And the outside inn was still open in those days, and Chris Hansen was the proprietor. And they had a candy counter. You could buy a candy bar for a nickel, but the best buy was a Tootsie Roll for a penny. And so we could take our pennies and get a Tootsie Roll on a walk home sometimes. But, once we went to high school, there was a bus that picked us up on a highway. Felt sorry for the kids that had to hike to the top of, say, Hillside Drive after they got off the bus.
They got very strong legs.
Yeah, but we would stay after school for sports. Say, I tried to play basketball. I was a terrible basketball player, but I would stay after school and practice with the team. And then there was a common thing to hitchhike home, and everybody hitchhiked in those days. Not a big deal, but today it's more dangerous, I guess. But everybody hitchhiked, or you walked. And when we were little kids, we walked everywhere in the canyon too. If you wanted to go visit a friend, your mom didn't have a car to drive you, you walked. Yeah.
You told me a story about playing basketball over on Cheney or Paradise.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I was trying to improve my basketball skills, and Carlos Baker, they had a basketball hoop, just one single basket, and a sloping court. And so 3 or 4 of us would meet and practice at this basketball court that the Bakers had. And it was, what was it, 3/4 of a mile hike up there, I guess? I don't know, something like that. But that was it. There was no flat ground in Topanga other than our grammar school playground, and the women's club didn't exist at that time, and so there was very little public meeting places either. When they had to have a public meeting for school board or something like that, they might have it at the Mermaid rather than I don't know, maybe at the school, but if it, sometimes at the Mermaid, but the Women's Club really provided quite an additional facility. So.
Was the Mermaid, what was the Mermaid function at that time?
It was really known as the Sylvia Park Country Club. It was built as part of the Sylvia Park subdivision and was a country club for the people that owned up there, I guess. Or they could choose to join it if they wanted to, I guess. But that was its, in the Topanga history, you'll see it mentioned as the Sylvia Park Country Club.
And going back to your experience at school, what was instruction like on a day-to-day basis? Did you do group work, or were there lectures? What was classroom management like?
In grammar school?
Yeah.
It just, we had old style desks that you might see pictures of, and it was reading, writing, arithmetic, I guess, pretty...
Did the teachers lecture, or did they ask the students to present, or?
Well, sometimes you'd have a quiz and things. Maybe it might be a math quiz or something. So.
And Will was asking about extracurriculars. You participated in the Scouts for a long time, in the Sea Scouts. Could you tell us more about your adventures?
Well, yeah, the Sea Scouts. Well, I got involved with the Boy Scouts first, and about when I was 14, I think probably, they had an active group of Sea Scouts, and somehow, this is about, say, about 1949 or 50, somewhere along there. The Sea Scouts acquired a surplus Navy crash boat, and this was a 36-foot boat built for rescuing down airplane pilots. And so it was powered with two big Hall Scott gasoline engines in it, and probably the fuel line was probably about this big around. And so when you slapped the throttles down, that thing would go. But even at 19 cents a gallon, the Boy Scouts couldn't afford to run it with the throttles down very long. But we worked on that boat to get it ready for the launching at what is now the end of the 7th Ray. And they had a empty spot. Somebody had an empty spot. We had the boat down there and sanded on the bottom and painted and did all the things necessary to get it launched. And eventually we got it in the water and on a mooring at the Santa Monica breakwater. There used to be a breakwater out there, but it got taken down by the storms in about 1980. And but at that time, we could go down and get a water taxi out to the boat and get aboard. And we took it to Catalina's more than once, and it was a very nice adventure to go out with a bunch of kids with a toy like that. It was quite impressive. It later somehow, whether a pipe fitting came loose or somebody didn't shut a valve, I didn't know, but it sank, partially sank in Santa Monica, and they discovered it in time to rescue it, but it had got soaked with seawater, and so it was a U.S. Navy backed project somewhat, and they took it to the Navy base at Terminal Island, and I remember driving to Terminal Island a few times to work on it down there. But eventually the project just was overwhelming. He couldn't afford to restore that poor water-sucked boat anymore. But there's a story about the Scouts, which to me is intriguing. I was in the Cub Scouts, and the Cub Scouts were young boys 9 to 12. Before you got to be a Boy Scout at age 12, you were a Cub Scout maybe. Well, this is during World War II, and I remember having a war bond drive, and there was a project to sell war bonds to the citizens. So Cub Scouts, we would have been 10 or 11 years old, going door to door selling war bonds of $25 denominations, $50 denominations, $100 denominations, and we'd knock on the door and people would give us the money and we'd sign them up for their war bond. And it just astounds me that there was that much trust of little kids, and the parents weren't with us. We just, a couple of us hiked around Hillside Drive and sold war bonds.
And over there on Trippett Ranch, you had a Quonset hut that was part of the Boy Scouts, correct? And you saw some pictures of you installing plumbing there, and also a picture of the Quonset hut surviving after I think it was the 1948 fire that your father would have helped contain.
Yeah, it was all, Quonset hut was all metal, so it survived the fire pretty good. And I think about the time that Quonset hut got put in, I went over to the Sea Scouts, and so I wasn't too involved with the Quonset hut project. But Trippett did support the scouting movement by providing that property, and he allowed us to put in a water line to serve it. And you can see the foundation. If you dig for it, probably you find the foundation for the Scout House up there. Yeah, and there, on the other side of the little ravine, there was a big barbecue built out of brick for quite a while. Yeah.
And you eventually ended up at UCLA, and your mom in her diary talks a lot about what a great student you were, and talks a little bit about how you and your brother kind of created a little study and living hut for yourselves. I thought that the details of that were fascinating. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, my brother and I were living in a converted chicken house at that time as a bedroom. And it was not very well insulated. It had a pretty low ceiling. You had to duck a little bit going in. But it was our bedroom, and so people didn't bother us too much if it was a little bit messy. And but when I was going to school, I would stay up studying pretty late sometimes. And so my brother, he was younger, and he cut himself a notch out of a cardboard box, which he used as a sleeping mask to cut the light out from my studies.
Yeah, I loved your pictures that I saw of that, which, completely your space. You decorated it, maps on the ceilings and lined with books, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was our space. We did what we wanted with it, but it wasn't. Pretty cold in the winter. No insulation, zero.
It was a chicken coop before it was your bedroom, right?
Yeah. And then
it became a
well,
boathouse.
yeah, it was a boathouse
and
for a
then
while.
It became my bedroom.
It got moved around the property short distances, but several times.
Yeah. And then
Where was it around here? Was it around here?
No, it's the property down below.
Oh, okay.
This property was undeveloped until I built the house in 1968. So this house is now 56 years old, something like that. Yeah.
I see.
Tell them how you did the engineering on the house and
I did the engineering
all
on
the
this
siding
house.
and
He didn't do all the siding. I did a lot of the siding. He did the tall stuff. And I did have to carry the board over. Some of those are heavier than they look. And if they're standing, they don't look very heavy. You pick up one of those big tall ones and you know you pick something up.
Right. Building this house, I had a contractor. I had an architect. First, I was going to design it myself, and I actually built a model of a house that I designed, and I built it on a little hill. But when I looked from the driveway in the front door, I was looking right into the bathroom, and I decided, shoot, we got to get an architect who makes this thing look right. And so I hired Doug Rucker, who's built quite a few things around Topanga and Malibu, and he came up with this plan. And in order to fit the plan here, I had to cut down 7 major oak trees. This is before the Coastal Commission. And then establishing its footprint, I surveyed it 3 times in order to avoid the other remaining oak trees to get it to fit. And finally we juggled it and everything fit except the oak tree that goes through the front entry deck, and that one didn't fit. But
Why did you decide to build a house here instead of staying down there? Or
it just seemed like we would have a nice view up here, and it,
Isolated too, from all the noise, traffic, down below.
it's worked out pretty good. We haven't modified a thing on the house since we built it, really.
this is the same house. I mean, you did not add to the house?
No.
No.
We built it, and there it is.
Okay, yeah. Very nice.
Having babies.
When we were building, money was tight, as it always is, it seemed like, and so my brother and I decided to put all the exterior boarding on. We took that item from the contractor and did it ourselves, which entailed some pretty tall scaffolding on the high sides. And it was a pretty good challenge. But the real challenge was each redwood board has several aluminum nails that you see the aluminum nails showing up, and we wanted them to be straight. And it was amazing how accurate your eye can pick up 1/8 of an inch from 50 feet away, it seems like. And so we worked all kinds of schemes to keep the nails straight. And if you put them on the wrong side of the string, you could sure see it. But we got it out, got it done.
And what kind of wood did you use for the facing of the house?
The house is entirely inside and out is clear heart redwood, which is impossible to buy today. And but that's the way we wanted it. And
It's very beautiful, yes. So you don't have to put anything on the wood, it just...
we, you see the house, it's 50 plus years old. We stripped the outside redwood one time and and bleached it out and put fresh oil on it
I see.
one time in 56 years.
Nice.
And the interior, we have never touched it.
I see.
But the house, the boards on the house are, like I say, clear heart redwood. But before we put them up, we dipped them in clear creosote.
Oh,
And so they were protected both by the redwood natural bug resistance and the creosote.
that was a good idea. Yeah.
But it smelled a little bad for a few years on the inside.
Oh, the creosote did not smell good. Yes. Okay.
When did you guys get phone lines up here, and what was that like?
Well, my dad was fire captain. He had a telephone, a fire telephone, direct to the fire station. Only it went only that one place. But he could call the fire station and ask them to call a doctor for him or something like that. So we didn't have any phones when I was a little kid until, I don't know, the late 40s. And my dad went around and signed up people to commit for telephone service in order to get enough subscribers for the telephone company to commit to installing the telephone poles and telephone lines. And so eventually we got a party line where you pick it up and there's other people on the line. You got to wait for them to get off. And then there was 3 rings for somebody and 2 longs and a short for somebody else, and different schemes of figuring out whose telephone you should be answering. But eventually we got our private line, of course.
I can't remember. Did you already state the year you were born? And I think the year you moved to Topanga with your parents was 1936. So.
I was born 1934, and my parents came to Topanga in 1937.
No, 1937. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I remember you told me that the firemen didn't have support for fighting fires when Harvey was captain, and so
They didn't have what?
support, like ground support for meals and things like that.
Oh, well, yeah, they didn't have as fancy of a backup system. Yeah. So the firemen's wives formed a firemen's auxiliary that would take meals to firemen on a major brush fire, and there was more volunteerism than there is today. It's almost like the firemen say, "We got our job to do. You go do your job and don't try to do our job," you know. But there was a lot of, if you heard the fire engine siren go off, people would flock to it to go help pull hose, and that's the way it was. There wasn't enough manpower, no air support. They did have big bulldozers for the major brush fires. Eventually, my dad got to be battalion chief and assistant division chief, or he was in charge of the big brush fires, and that was what he really enjoyed doing. He liked to be the general and move his assets, and he always wanted his people to know the ground they were fighting the fire on and where the fire might go next. not be guessing at strange territory.
They had one fire in the Malibu Tunnel, didn't they?
They had a fire. Oh, it was not the Malibu Tunnel. It was a fire in the. It was a unique fire that my dad told me about. They had a fire in the Santa Susana Tunnel. The tunnel timbering creosote caught fire in the Santa Susana Tunnel on the railroad. The railroad leaves San Fernando Valley, goes through a tunnel to get to Simi Valley. And here the thing was burning. And so my dad had contacts with maybe Rocketdyne or somebody. They got a hold of somebody, brought some big fans in at the front end of the tunnel, because the tunnel fire is really impossible to get at, you know. They brought the big fans in and turned them on, and were blowing a lot of air through the tunnel, but then they threw a lot of water in front of the fans and blew this fog through the tunnel and snuffed the fire real quick. They just took care of it.
That's great, amazing ingenuity. Are there any others? I think there were quite a few fires. As you were growing up, and saw a picture of you helping. I think were you reseeding at the site of the Topanga Community House?
I was just kind of being an observer, watching what was going on. They were reseeding with an antique helicopter in that picture, yeah. But variety of fires over the years. But when you had a fire, people would run towards the fire more than running away from it in order to help and put it out. And there's parts of the canyon that would be dangerous to stay in if you had a major fire. But where we live here, in the last 100 years, say, or more, we've never had a fire through this neighborhood. We've been lucky.
They've come pretty close, though.
They've burnt on the west side over there, and they burnt on the east side, and
All around us.
You mentioned in passing once that you thought Harvey maybe picked the site with some eye towards a fire break or wind patterns.
I don't know that. I don't know if he knew that at the time or not. He may have just lucked out. Hard to say.
Growing up, did you guys keep animals or garden?
Yeah, we had all of that. Yeah.
What did you keep?
We didn't have a lot of money, it seemed like. And we got really tired of eating squash sometimes. And
That's for sure.
and we had goats when I was little. They milked the goats, and my dad had to butcher the goats.
Really good.
I ended up having goats here when our kids were growing up, and we topped out at 34 goats one year.
34.
34.
I'll say something about that. Yeah, I do remember getting up at 5:30 every morning and milking 8 goats. And we would
For a long time, though, Dad.
and we would bring in so much milk that we had to make cheese and yogurt and custard. Mom made excellent custard, and we had a whole bunch of chickens and a whole bunch of rabbits, and we were definitely loaded on the animal side. So, and we butchered many of them too.
A lot of people won't have it.
So,
They don't want to
Yeah,
do all the work that goes with it.
definitely a lot of work. Yeah, so.
I think in the Topanga story it mentions that you had your mom held some square dances on your patio and you had a goat milk ice cream.
Probably, yeah.
Oh, we did have goat milk ice cream, I remember that.
Yeah.
I had to turn it, a lot of it, to become ice cream. It was milk.
Yeah.
Milk and some other things added to it to help it, semi-hard.
And Grandma Alice carved some pretty neat wood sculptures. How did she get into that?
I don't know how she got into it, but there was a local guy who was a very good wood carver, John Raymond, and he had a studio there just up the canyon here, a short distance, where he did his wood carving, and he gave lessons to my mother, and so she tackled some pretty amazing wood carving pieces, and she did that till her arthritis kind of killed her hands for doing the heavy chiseling.
So is your chicken coop bungalow and the original family house, are those both still standing?
Yeah, it is.
Actually,
Quite a bit improved.
yeah, it became my bedroom after all that. And my father's bedroom. I mean, my brother's bedroom. So, Dan Anderson, and then after that, it was very cold in the wintertime. Didn't have the insulation, and the ivy would grow through the boards, and it was cold. But after that, we turned it into it became a cat house, and then we remodeled it into a bedroom. We put a foundation under it and turned it into something a little bit cleaner. But it had many lives. So.
And the 713 property, you bought that in, what, 1968?
65,
65.
yeah.
And you want to tell a little bit about that?
When I was growing up, there were 3 houses over there. One of them was taken down many years ago. It's part of the Pittsburgh property now. But that one was built probably in the 1920 or before. And there was a half acre on the other side of Robinson Road, which was part of the same property, owned by the same property owner. And when I was a kid, there was a big barn on that property that, when I think about it today, was a carriage house. And so it's curious to me, why would somebody build a carriage house when the automobiles were all pretty much in place? And so I'm wondering if maybe the property was built before 1920. But at any rate, the carriage house had a central aisle and stalls on both sides, and it had a penthouse on a roof where a stable keeper could live. And of course, the house was built without any indoor plumbing, and a very meager water supply. There's a corner in the bedroom where I like to show people that the original countertop is just set at a proper height for a water basin and a pitcher of water for an old guy with a handlebar mustache could be shaving with his straight edge and be looking really sharp. Yes, still part of the house. Haven't remodeled that part yet.
And the archway over the door.
The archway of the door, the chimney extends all the way across the front door so that the front door enters through the chimney structure. Chimney out of rock, not brick. And the door is unique in that it has a circular arch top to it. And circular arch top, it tells me that it probably was built by Bill Neen, who was an Englishman from the Isle of Man, and he lived nearby in the early days of Topanga, and he most likely had a hand in building that chimney and that door. The house itself is kind of post and beam. The would never pass building code today. The foundation is non-existent. The floor joists sit on stacked rocks, which
I love that house.
you like the house.
And I'm gonna
So
retire in
when you go from one room to another, usually there's a stairway to go up or down. And Laurel is getting her exercise, going up and down the stairways.
Larry,
Yes.
it's quite evident that your family, all the generations, have quite an independent homesteading attitude in how you've put together all these properties, which I find to be, quite inspiring and beautiful. Did you find that there are other family friends in the canyon that also had this, and do you have any memories of going to others' houses or others' properties for dinner or for building with them? Are there other families with this greatness like yours that have built properties here and developed their own family homesteads?
Yeah, there probably were. I don't think of anybody
well, Dad,
directly offhand,
our
but
doctor, we've gone up to his house up there.
who's?
The doctors that we go to.
Oh,
The one doctor, I don't remember his name.
um,
Haven't had to go to the doctor for
I
a
don't
long
know.
time.
At any rate, yeah. Well, of course, in the early days, people started out with bigger pieces of property until you started developing piece and cut off a piece to develop and sell to make a profit too. So.
Right.
But Topanga has been very slow in doing that because of the utility issues. No sewers. The water situation, very limited development for many, many years. And now with all the environmental issues, it's almost impossible to get a permit on parts of the canyon, I think, coastal zone and environmental zoning, and I got a letter not too long ago and basically says I can't cut weeds beyond my fire zone without a permit, and so that's pretty restrictive on doing anything. So it appears that the government really kind of wants it status quo and not developed any further.
And a lot of Topangans left and went to Idaho and
Yeah, people,
Oregon and
certain
places
people
north.
have bailed. Yeah, they bailed and said that's enough. I'm getting too crowded.
Yeah, you look at these trees, how much this stuff dumps. And we've got to get it off, take it off our roof, get for fire.
Well, looking at the trees reminds me of Mort Allen cutting firewood. When the trees are cut down and you got a stump, oftentimes the stump sends new sprouts up and it grows new trees. like this big tree behind me, likely was cut, and a couple sprouts came out, and so you got a new tree that's grown from the old stump. And an oak tree doesn't naturally grow with multi-stumps. So when you see multi-stumps, you're probably looking at a remnants of a original tree that got cut for firewood.
Well, thank you so much, Larry, and Janet, and Laurel, and Dan. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and we want to continue this conversation, and looking forward to seeing some of the sites you've mentioned.
Okay, I hope it's useful for you.
Definitely really, really enjoyable to hear your stories. We appreciate you sharing.
Okay.